The November wind carved through Fifth Avenue like a blade, sharp enough to make even the most hardened New Yorkers pull their collars tight. Inside Olympus, the crown jewel of Nikos Stavros' restaurant empire, warmth radiated from marble walls adorned with gold leaf moldings and crystal chandeliers that cast fractured light across white tablecloths. The dinner rush had ended an hour ago, leaving only the soft clinking of silverware being sorted and the low murmur of staff preparing for close. Nikos stood at the bar, a glass of metaxa untouched before him, his dark eyes scanning the room with the practiced vigilance of a man who had survived 3 decades by noticing what others missed. At 38, he carried himself with the kind of authority that didn't need announcement. Broad shoulders filling out a tailored Tom Ford suit, the top 2 buttons of his black silk shirt undone to reveal the edge of intricate ink that crawled up his neck, a permanent reminder of debts paid and wars won. His hair, jet black and slicked back in the classic manner of old Athenian nobility, caught the light as he turned his head. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe caught the chandelier's glow, and a gold signet ring bearing his family crest pressed into his right hand as he drummed his fingers against the mahogany. He had been born in Athens, in the shadow of the Acropolis, where his grandfather had run numbers and his father had expanded into something larger, something that eventually required fleeing across the Atlantic when Nikos was 12. Brooklyn became home. Its streets, its codes, its unspoken hierarchies. By 25, he had carved out territory. By 30, he controlled it. Now, at 38, Nikos Stavros was more than a name whispered in fear. He was an institution, a myth made flesh, the Greek king of an American underworld. But myths, he had learned, were lonely. His attention drifted to the back corner where the new girl worked. Eleni Costa, 26 years old, hired 3 weeks ago on the recommendation of one of the line cooks whose cousin knew her family. She was beautiful in the way autumn leaves are beautiful, fragile, transient, tinged with something already broken. Blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, hazel eyes that never quite met anyone's gaze, a slender frame that moved through the dining room like a ghost trying not to disturb the air. Nikos had noticed her immediately, not because of her looks. Beautiful women were common in his world, but because of her fear. It clung to her like perfume, acrid and unmistakable. The way she flinched when doors slammed. The way she kept her sleeves pulled down even in the kitchen's heat. The way she smiled with her mouth, but never her eyes. Tonight, she was clearing the last table near the window, her movements mechanical, efficient. She reached for a wine glass, and as her fingers closed around the stem, a passing busboy bumped the table. The glass slipped, tumbling in slow motion, before shattering against the marble floor in an explosion of crystal shards. Eleni recoiled as if struck, stumbling backward, her hands flying up to protect her face. A small, choked sound escaped her throat. Not quite a scream, but something worse. Something practiced. The restaurant fell silent. Nikos was moving before he consciously decided to, his expensive shoes crunching over broken glass as he crossed the room. The other staff froze, watching their boss approach the trembling girl with an intensity that made the air feel electric. Eleni. His voice was low, controlled, the Greek accent still present after all these years. Look at me. She shook her head, blonde strands escaping her bun, her whole body rigid with terror. I'm sorry, she whispered in English, then switched to Greek, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. Signomi, the thexena simvi. I'm sorry, it won't happen again. I'm not angry about the glass, Nikos said, his tone gentler now, though no less commanding. He crouched slightly, bringing himself to her eye level, close enough to see the way her pupils were blown wide with panic. Who are you afraid of? Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The other staff had the good sense to find tasks elsewhere, melting into the kitchen and back offices, leaving only the two of them in the dining room's fading light. "If I speak," Eleni finally whispered, her voice barely audible, still in Greek, "he'll hurt me again." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Nikos felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. Not quite anger, not yet, but the prelude to it. The gathering storm. He had built his empire on violence when necessary, yes, but also on a code. Women and children were not touched. Innocents were not harmed. These were not suggestions. They were law, carved into the foundation of everything he controlled. He straightened to his full height, his expression hardening into something that had made grown men weep. When he spoke, it was with the absolute certainty of a man who had never failed to keep a promise. "Tell me who did it." 4 words. Simple. Final. Eleni looked up at him then. Really looked. Her hazel eyes searching his face for something. Permission, maybe, or protection. Or perhaps just proof that the world could contain men who didn't destroy everything they touched. Whatever she found there must have been enough, because she drew a shaking breath and whispered a name. "Marcus Delano. He's a police officer. Narcotics Division." Nikos's jaw tightened. He knew the name. Everyone in his world knew that name. Delano was a cancer, a cop who used his badge as a weapon and his connections as a shield, rumored to be involved in everything from evidence tampering to the trafficking networks that Nikos had been working to dismantle for the past 2 years. The man was untouchable, or so the streets said. The streets were wrong. "Come with me," Nikos said, offering his hand. Eleni stared at it, at the gold ring, the visible edge of dark ink on his wrist, the strength in those fingers that could both build empires and tear them down. After a long moment, she placed her small, trembling hand in his. And with that simple touch, both their fates were sealed. The apartment Nikos took her to wasn't his primary residence. That penthouse in Tribeca was too exposed, too well known to both allies and enemies. Instead, he brought Eleni to a safe house in the financial district, a 19th floor corner unit with bulletproof windows and a security system that would make the Secret Service envious. The interior was sparse but comfortable. Cream-colored walls, minimalist furniture, a kitchen stocked for extended stays, and a view of the Manhattan skyline that looked like a circuit board of lights against the night. Eleni stood in the center of the living room, her arms wrapped around herself, still wearing her work uniform, black pants and a white button-down that was 2 sizes too large, probably borrowed or bought secondhand. In the apartment's soft lighting, Nikos could finally see what the restaurant's ambiance had hidden. A purple bruise that disappeared beneath her collar, the slightly swollen quality of her left cheekbone, the way she held her right arm as if protecting broken ribs. Rage moved through him like lava, slow and inevitable. "There are 2 bedrooms," he said, his voice carefully neutral as he removed his suit jacket and draped it over a chair. The movement revealed more of the tattoos that covered his arms and chest, a labyrinth of Greek symbols, Orthodox crosses, and names of the fallen written in elegant script. "The one on the right is yours. I'll take the left. The kitchen is fully stocked. If you need anything, clothes, medicine, anything, write it down and I'll have it delivered." Eleni nodded, but didn't move, her eyes tracking him with the wariness of a wild animal confronted by something unknown. "Why are you helping me?" The question came out hoarse, as if her throat was still recovering from screaming. Nikos paused in the act of rolling up his sleeves, meeting her gaze directly. "Because you asked. Because you were brave enough to say his name." He finished with the cuffs and moved to the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of water from the filtered pitcher in the refrigerator. He handed her one. "And because men like Marcus Delano don't get to exist in my city." "Your city?" A ghost of something, maybe defiance, maybe humor, flickered across her face. "I thought this was everyone's city." You haven't been here long enough to understand how things work." He leaned against the counter, the water glass dwarfed by his large hands. "New York has many kings. I'm just one of them. But my kingdom has rules, and rule number 1 is simple. The strong don't prey on the weak. When they do, they answer to me." She took a small sip of water, her throat working as she swallowed. "He said if I ever told anyone, he'd kill my parents. They live in Astoria, above the bakery on Ditmars Boulevard. He knows where they sleep, what time my father opens the shop, which window my mother likes to sit by in the afternoon." Her voice cracked. "He has people watching them." "Not anymore." Nikos pulled out his phone, typing a quick message. "As of 10 minutes ago, your parents have protection. 2 of my best men are outside their building right now, and 2 more will arrive within the hour. Delano's watchers will find themselves suddenly unemployed, permanently." Eleni's eyes widened. "You can do that? Just like that? I can do a lot of things." He pocketed the phone. "The question is, are you ready for what comes next? Because once I start dismantling Marcus Delano, there's no going back. He'll realize you talked. He'll realize I'm coming. And he'll do everything in his power to hurt you before I finish him." She was quiet for a long time, staring into her water glass as if it held answers. When she finally looked up, something had shifted in her expression. The fear was still there, but beneath it lay a foundation of steel that Nikos recognized, because he had forged the same steel in himself decades ago, in the Brooklyn streets where weakness meant death. "I'm ready," she said. "Tell me what I need to do." Over the next 3 days, the safe house became a war room. Nikos brought in his most trusted advisors: Andreas, his second in command, a bear of a man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow; Sophia, his intelligence specialist, who could hack into anything with a power source; and Father Dimitri, an Orthodox priest who served as both spiritual counsel and surprising tactical genius, having survived the Yugoslav wars before immigrating to America. They gathered around the dining table, laptops and documents spreading across its surface like a paper infection. Eleni sat in the corner, wrapped in one of Nikos's hoodies. It hung on her like a dress, watching as the people who ran Brooklyn's underworld plotted the downfall of a corrupt cop. "Delano's involved in 3 major operations," Sophia announced, her fingers flying across her keyboard as lines of code scrolled across the screen. "Human trafficking through Port Newark, using compromised NYPD evidence lockers to move product for the Bratva, and running protection rackets on immigrant-owned businesses in Queens and the Bronx. He's got the protection of his precinct captain, who's got the protection of someone higher up. Haven't cracked that yet." "The trafficking is the priority," Nikos said, his finger tracing a route on the map spread before him. "That's the operation I've been trying to infiltrate for 2 years. If Delano is the enforcement arm, taking him down might reveal the entire network." Andreas grunted his agreement. "Problem is, he's smart, never uses his own phone for business, never meets contacts in person if he can help it, and he's paranoid enough to sweep for bugs weekly. We've tried getting close before. Lost 2 good men in the attempt." Father Dimitri, looking incongruous in his black cassock amid the tactical discussion, stroked his long gray beard thoughtfully. "Perhaps we're thinking about this wrong. We don't need to catch him in the act. We need to make him think he's already caught. Fear makes men careless." Nikos turned to Eleni. "Tell me everything. How you met, how it started, when it changed. Every detail matters." So she told them. The story poured out of her like poison from a wound. How she'd met Marcus 8 months ago at a community event in Astoria. How charming he'd seemed at first. How quickly the charm had turned to control. The first time he'd hit her, he'd apologized with tears in his eyes, swearing it would never happen again. By the 3rd time, he'd stopped apologizing. By the 10th, he'd started bringing friends to watch. "He has videos," she said quietly, her hands clenched in her lap. "Of me. Of what he made me do. He said if I ever left, He'd send them to everyone I knew, put them on the internet, make sure I could never show my face again. The room fell silent except for the soft clicking of Sophia's keyboard as she made notes. Nikos's expression remained carefully blank, but his hands had curled into fists on the table, the knuckles white beneath the tattoos. Where does he keep the videos? On his phone, I think. Maybe his laptop. He was always filming, always saying it was insurance. Then we get the devices and we destroy them, Andreas said simply. Along with any cloud backups. I know people. We do more than that, Nikos said, his voice dropping to something cold and final. We make sure Marcus Delano understands what it means to be afraid. That night, after the others had left, Nikos found Eleni standing at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city. She'd showered and changed into clothes Sophia had brought. Simple jeans and a soft sweater that actually fit her slender frame. Her blonde hair hung loose around her shoulders, still damp, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked her age. Young, vulnerable, alive. Can't sleep? He asked, approaching slowly, careful not to startle her. She shook her head. Every time I close my eyes, I see him. I hear his voice. I feel. She trailed off, wrapping her arms around herself. Nikos stood beside her, maintaining a respectful distance, both of them reflected in the glass against the glittering backdrop of Manhattan. It gets better, he said quietly. Not quickly, and not easily, but it does. The nightmares fade. The fear becomes manageable. You learn to breathe again. You sound like you know from experience. I do. He was silent for a moment, then added, My mother, my father. Different circumstances, same result. People who thought they were untouchable, taking what they wanted, leaving destruction behind. He touched the window with one finger, tracing invisible patterns. I was 12 when I learned that the world doesn't care about justice unless someone makes it care. So I became the someone. Eleni turned to look at him, really study him for the first time. In the window's reflection, their eyes met, his dark and ancient with violence witnessed, hers hazel and new with violence survived. Are you a good man, Nikos Stavros? He smiled, but there was no humor in it. No, but I'm very good at what I do, and what I do is make bad men afraid. Then make him afraid, she whispered. Make him feel what I felt every day for 8 months. I will, Nikos promised, and when I'm done, Marcus Delano will wish he'd never learned your name. Outside, the city blazed eternal, indifferent to the small war being planned in its heights, to the vengeance taking shape in the space between a broken girl and a broken king, who'd both learned that sometimes salvation wears a monster's face. The investigation into Marcus Delano's empire began like all good campaigns, with patience, precision, and the understanding that rushing would only alert the prey. For Nikos, who had built his reputation on strategic thinking as much as ruthless action, this was familiar territory. But what wasn't familiar was the way he found himself watching over Eleni in the quiet moments, the way his chest tightened when she woke screaming from nightmares at 3 a.m, the way he'd started making her tea without being asked, remembering after the second night that she preferred honey to sugar. He was getting involved, not just strategically, but personally. And that, more than any enemy, was dangerous territory. Sophia cracked the first major breakthrough on day 5. She'd been monitoring Delano's digital footprint, not his official devices, which were clean, but the ghost trails that even paranoid men left behind. He uses a burner phone for his trafficking contacts, she announced, her laptop screen reflecting in her dark eyes as she worked. Thinks he's clever, routing everything through VPNs and encrypted apps, but nobody's as clever as they think. Can you trace it? Nikos asked, leaning over her shoulder. Can I trace it? She sounded almost offended. I already have. He's got a meeting scheduled for tomorrow night, 11 p.m., at a warehouse in Red Hook. According to the texts I've recovered, he's supposed to be inspecting a new shipment of girls coming in from Eastern Europe. The words landed like stones in still water. Nikos felt his jaw tighten, that familiar cold rage settling over him like armor. How many? The messages mention 15, ages 13 to 22. Andreas, standing by the window, made a sound deep in his chest like a growl. Even Father Dmitri, who'd seen the worst of humanity during the Balkan conflicts, crossed himself and muttered a prayer in Serbian. Eleni, who'd been sitting quietly on the couch pretending to read a book, spoke up. You're going to stop it. It wasn't a question. Yes, Nikos said simply. But we need to be smart about this. If we just raid the warehouse, we save those girls but lose the chance to dismantle the entire network. We need to follow the chain all the way up. Let him think the delivery went through, Sophia suggested, her fingers already flying across the keys. I can fake the confirmation texts, make it seem like the girls were picked up and distributed. Then we track where he thinks they went and find his buyers. And the actual girls? Eleni's voice was sharp, cutting through the tactical discussion. While you're playing spy games, what happens to them? Nikos met her eyes. We get them out first, quietly, before Delano ever arrives. Then we stage the scene to make it look like the pickup happened as planned. The girls go to a safe location. I have contacts with federal agencies who specialize in this, people I trust. They'll be cared for, protected, given asylum if they want it. Why do you have contacts with federal agencies? Eleni asked, suspicion evident in her tone. I thought people in your position avoided law enforcement. Most do, Nikos acknowledged, but I'm not most people. I have an understanding with certain individuals in certain departments. They look the other way on my business ventures that don't hurt anyone, and I provide them with information on operations that do. Like trafficking rings. Like corrupt cops who've forgotten which side they're supposed to be on. Andreas snorted. Tell her the real reason, boss. Tell her about Elena. Something flickered across Nikos's face. Pain, old and scarred, but not quite healed. He was silent for a long moment before speaking. I had a sister. Elena. 3 years younger than me. Beautiful, smart, wanted to be a doctor. He paused, his hand unconsciously moving to a spot on his chest where Eleni knew, from glimpses when he'd rolled up his sleeves, he had a name tattooed over his heart. When she was 17, she was taken, grabbed off the street in Astoria on her way home from school. The men who took her were part of a trafficking ring connected to a corrupt INS official who targeted immigrant families, knowing we wouldn't go to the police. Eleni's breath caught. What happened? I found her 3 days later, or what was left of her. His voice was flat, emotionless in the way that meant the emotion was too big to express. We got her to a hospital, but the damage was done. She survived physically, mentally. He shook his head. She moved to Greece 6 years ago. Lives in a monastery on Crete. She doesn't talk. Doesn't leave her room most days. She's alive. But the girl she was died in that warehouse. The safe house fell silent. Even Sophia had stopped typing. So no, Nikos continued, his dark eyes boring into Eleni's. We don't play games with the girls in that warehouse. We get them out first. Always. Then, we burn down the men who put them there. That night, Nikos assembled a team. Not his usual enforcers, but specialists. People who could move silently, who knew how to extract hostages without alerting guards, who'd done this kind of work in worse places than Red Hook warehouses. He briefed them in the safe house's living room, while Eleni watched from the kitchen, absorbing every detail. 6 guards on site, Andreas reported, studying blueprints spread across the coffee table. 4 outside, 2 inside. They're expecting Delano at 11, but the girls arrived this afternoon, being held in the back section, manifested as machine parts through a shell company with ties to the Odessa mob. Odessa, Father Dmitri mused. That means Gregor Volkov is involved. He controls Port Newark's eastern dock operations. We've known Volkov's dirty for years, Nikos said. But he's protected by the same political machine that shields Delano. Taking down this operation gives us leverage on both. What about the girls? One of the specialists asked, a lean woman named Katya, who'd once been Spetsnaz. After extraction, where do they go? I have a place, Nikos said. A facility in Westchester, run by a non-profit I fund anonymously. Medical care, legal services, trauma counseling, education. They stay as long as they need. Get help processing asylum claims, job training when they're ready. No one's pressured to leave. No one's forced to testify if they're not comfortable. Katya nodded approvingly. You've done this before. Too many times, Nikos admitted. But never enough. There's always another warehouse, another shipment, another Marcus Delano thinking he can do whatever he wants because he has a badge. The operation went smoothly, too smoothly, which should have been Nikos's first warning that something was wrong. His team infiltrated the warehouse at 9 p.m., 2 hours before Delano's scheduled arrival. The guards were neutralized with precision, alive but unconscious, cable-tied and stashed in a maintenance closet. The girls were found exactly where intelligence suggested, locked in a converted storage room that smelled of rust and fear. Katya led the extraction while Nikos stayed back to coordinate, watching through body camera feeds as 15 terrified young women were guided out into waiting vans. Medical personnel were ready, translators for 6 different languages, blankets and water and patient hands that didn't grab. But when Sophia checked her intercepts, her face went pale. Problem. Big problem. What? Nikos's attention snapped to her. Delano changed his plans. He's not coming at 11. He's coming now. And he's bringing friends. I'm reading 6 vehicles. At least 20 men, maybe more. They're 3 minutes out. The warehouse was supposed to be empty by then, staged to look like a successful pickup. But half the girls were still in the vans, and his team was still on site. If Delano arrived now, it would be a massacre. Get everyone out, Nikos ordered into his comms, already moving toward the door of the safe house. Katya, you have 2 minutes to clear the area. Leave the guards, leave the staging. Just get those girls safe. Where are you going? Eleni's voice cut through the organized chaos. He paused, one hand on the doorknob, and looked back at her. The girl who'd been afraid to break a wine glass now stood with her chin raised, fear in her eyes, but determination in the set of her jaw. I'm going to buy them time. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. He knows my voice, she insisted. He knows how I sound when I'm scared. If you need to delay him, to make him think everything's normal, you need me. Every instinct Nikos possessed screamed at him to refuse, to lock her in the safe house and go alone. But she was right, and they both knew it. Time was a luxury they didn't have. Stay behind me, he finally said. Do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. And if I say run, you run. Understood? She nodded, already grabbing a jacket. As they raced through Manhattan toward Red Hook, Nikos made a call he'd hoped to avoid. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. This is a surprise, Stavros. You only call when you need something illegal. Hello, Detective Chen, Nikos said calmly, though his Mercedes was doing 90 down the FDR drive. How would you like to be the one who busts the trafficking ring your department's been investigating for 3 years? There was a long pause. I'm listening. Red Hook, Pier 41, Warehouse 7. Marcus Delano is about to walk into what he thinks is a trafficking pickup. 15 victims already safe. But he's bringing 20 armed men, and some of my people are still on site getting the last civilians clear. I need SWAT. I need them now. And I need them to come in quiet until I give you the signal. And in exchange? In exchange, I hand you Delano, Gregor Volkov, and everyone connected to this operation. Full evidence packages, testimony from victims, financial records that Sophia's been compiling for months. Everything you need to make this stick in court. Another pause. I'll have units rolling in 5 minutes. But Stavros, if this is a setup, it's not. Check your secure email in 30 seconds. Sophia's sending you the proof now. He ended the call and glanced at Eleni in the passenger seat. She was pale but steady, her hands clasped in her lap. Last chance to stay in the car when we arrive. Not a chance, she said quietly. They reached the warehouse district as Delano's convoy was pulling up. 6 black SUVs that screamed either law enforcement or organized crime, which in this case amounted to the same thing. Nikos parked his Mercedes in the shadows between buildings, killing the engine and pulling Eleni down below the dashboard. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice low and urgent. "In about 90 seconds, my people will be clear, and SWAT will have the perimeter surrounded. But Delano's going to go inside first, expecting to find his shipment. When he realizes something's wrong, he'll either run or start shooting. I need you to call him. Tell him you're inside. Tell him you're scared. Tell him you ran from me and you need help. Draw him deeper into the warehouse, away from the exits." "You want me to use his abuse against him?" Eleni said, understanding immediately. "You want me to pretend I'm still his victim?" "Yes. And I hate asking you to do it, but it might be the only way to get him isolated enough for law enforcement to take him without casualties." She was quiet for a moment, staring at the warehouse where, days ago, 15 girls had been held in exactly the kind of hell she'd escaped. Then she pulled out her phone, the same one Delano had given her, that Sophia had cloned and monitored, and dialed his number. It rang 3 times. Then his voice, smooth and cruel, filled the car's interior on speakerphone. "Eleni, I was wondering when you'd come crawling back." Nikos watched her face as she answered, watched her transform into the frightened woman Delano expected, and felt something crack in his chest at how easily she could slip back into that role, how much practice she'd had pretending to be smaller than she was. "Marcus, please," she whispered, her voice breaking perfectly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. He found me, the man from the restaurant. He brought me here and locked me in, but I got away." "Where?" Delano's voice was sharp now, suspicious. "The warehouse. The one you told me about, where you work sometimes. I saw the address in your phone. I didn't know where else to go." A pause. "Please don't be angry. I'll do anything. Just don't hurt my parents." Through the windshield, Nikos watched Delano exit his SUV, gesturing for his men to fan out, but the corrupt cop himself was moving toward the warehouse entrance, drawn by the sound of his victim's fear like a shark to blood in the water. "Stay where you are," Delano ordered into the phone. "I'm coming to get you. And Eleni, when I find you, we're going to have a long conversation about loyalty." The call ended. Eleni's hands were shaking, but her eyes were hard. "How long?" 2 minutes. Then Chen's team moves in. Nikos checked his watch, monitoring the SWAT positions through updates from Sophia. "You did perfectly. He's going in alone. Thinks his men will secure the perimeter." "What if he finds me before the police arrive?" "He won't," Nikos said with absolute certainty. "Because I'll be there first." The warehouse interior was a cathedral of shadows and steel, vast enough to swallow sound, cold enough that breath turned to frost. Nikos moved through it like a predator in its natural habitat, his expensive shoes silent on concrete, every sense attuned to the space around him. Behind him, maintaining exactly 12 feet of distance as instructed, Eleni followed with a grace born of 8 months of learning how to be invisible, how to not provoke, how to survive. They could hear Delano now, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness, his voice calling out with false sweetness that made Eleni's skin crawl. "Come out, baby. I'm not angry. I know you were scared. We'll go home. We'll talk it through. Everything will be fine. The words were so practiced, so familiar. How many times had she heard variations of that lie? How many times had she believed it in those early days, before she learned that his version of fine meant bruises hidden under long sleeves? Nikos raised a hand, signaling for her to stop. They'd reached the back section of the warehouse, where industrial shelving units created a maze of corridors and hiding spots. Perfect for an ambush. Perfect for forcing Delano into a position where SWAT could take him without risking crossfire. Now, Nikos whispered, nodding to her. Eleni took a breath and called out, making her voice small and frightened. Marcus, I'm here. I'm sorry. Please don't hurt me. The footsteps stopped, then came faster, eager. Where, baby? Keep talking so I can find you. By the blue containers, she said, using the description Nikos had given her. I'm scared. There was so much blood earlier. What happened here? Just business. Delano's voice was closer now, maybe 20 yards away. Nothing for you to worry about. Come on out and we'll leave, just you and me. But Nikos had positioned them perfectly. As Delano rounded the corner between shelving units, he found himself in a dead end. A wide corridor with no exits except the way he came. And there, standing in the shadows, was the Greek mafioso he'd been hearing rumors about for years. Nikos Stavros in the flesh, all 6 feet 2 inches of tailored menace, his dark eyes reflecting what little light penetrated this far into the warehouse. And beside him, no longer cowering but standing tall, was Eleni. Delano's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, understanding, and finally rage. His hand moved toward the weapon holstered at his hip, but Nikos was faster, producing a Glock 19 from inside his jacket with the ease of long practice. I wouldn't, Nikos said calmly. Your friends outside are currently being arrested by every SWAT team in Brooklyn. Detective Chen says hello, by the way. She's very grateful for the evidence we provided. You can't touch me, Delano snarled, but there was fear in his eyes now, the same fear he'd cultivated in others for so long. I'm a police officer. You'll go to prison just for pointing that gun at me. Will I? Nikos sounded almost amused. Tell me, Officer Delano, do your superiors know about the trafficking ring you've been running through Port Newark? Do they know about the protection money you've been collecting from every immigrant business in Queens? Do they know about the women you've hurt? You have no proof. Actually, Sophia's voice crackled over the comm system Nikos wore, audible enough for Delano to hear. We have all of it. Every text message, every financial transaction, every video you thought you'd encrypted, including the ones of Eleni. They're already in federal custody, by the way. Your insurance policy just became evidence. Delano's face went white. His eyes locked on Eleni, and in them she saw the realization that his victim had become his downfall. You bitch, he breathed. You actually think you've won? Do you know what I'll do to you? What I'll do to your family? You'll do nothing, Nikos interrupted, his voice dropping to something cold and final. Because in approximately 30 seconds, SWAT is coming through that door to take you into custody. And after that, you'll spend the rest of your life in a federal prison where your badge means nothing and everyone knows you're a trafficker. Do you know what inmates do to cops? Do you know what they do to cops who hurt women and children? The color drained further from Delano's face. Outside, they could hear shouting, the organized chaos of a tactical team moving into position. But before anyone could move, Delano made his choice. His hand finally cleared his holster, bringing his service weapon up in a movement born of training and desperation. Nikos was already moving, pushing Eleni behind a steel pillar as the first shot rang out, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. But Nikos didn't return fire. Instead, he simply waited as SWAT came crashing through the doors, as red laser sights painted Delano from a dozen different angles, as the corrupt cop found himself surrounded with his weapon drawn on a civilian. Drop it! The command came from multiple throats at once. For a moment, Delano seemed to consider suicide by cop. His hand tightened on his weapon, his jaw clenched. But then survival instinct won over pride. The gun clattered to the concrete. As SWAT moved in to cuff him, Delano looked past them to where Eleni stood protected by Nikos's body, and he smiled. A cold, cruel expression that promised this wasn't over. "You think you're safe now? You think taking me down ends this? There are others. There will always be others. And one day, when you're not expecting it..." "That's enough." Detective Chen appeared, taking personal custody of the prisoner. She looked at Nikos and nodded once. Acknowledgement, not friendship, but something like mutual respect between people who operated on opposite sides of the law, but occasionally wanted the same things. "We'll need statements from both of you. But not tonight. Tonight, get her somewhere safe." As they led Delano away, still spitting threats and curses, Eleni felt her legs give out. All the adrenaline that had kept her upright through the confrontation drained away at once, leaving her trembling violently. She would have collapsed if Nikos hadn't caught her, his arms strong and steady as he lowered them both to the floor, letting her shake against his chest while he murmured something in Greek. Old words, probably a prayer, maybe a promise. "It's done," he said when she could breathe again. "He can't hurt you anymore." "But he was right," she whispered. "There are others. The men he worked with, the people who protected him, the network he was part of. They'll know I'm the one who helped bring him down." "Let them know," Nikos said fiercely, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. "Let them all know. Because what they'll learn is that anyone who touches you answers to me. And I don't forgive, Eleni. I don't forget. And I never lose." In the weeks that followed, Nikos's promise proved true. The evidence Sophia had compiled didn't just bring down Marcus Delano. It toppled an entire hierarchy of corruption. 3 more police officers were arrested. 2 city officials resigned ahead of criminal charges. Gregor Volkov's port operations were shut down by federal authorities, and the Odessa mob's trafficking routes through New York were effectively destroyed. The 15 girls rescued from the warehouse were safe in Westchester, beginning the long process of healing. Several had already agreed to testify, knowing they had protection not just from law enforcement, but from the shadowy figure who'd orchestrated their rescue. But for Eleni, the victory felt hollow. She was safe, yes. Free, yes. Her parents were protected. Delano was in custody. The videos that had been used to control her were destroyed. By every measure, she should have been celebrating. Instead, she found herself standing at the window of the safe house at 3 a.m, unable to sleep, jumping at every sound. The trauma didn't disappear just because the threat was gone. The nightmares didn't stop just because the monster was locked away. "I thought it would feel different," she said, when Nikos emerged from his room, drawn by the sound of her movement. He'd started sleeping in his clothes, she noticed, or not sleeping at all, keeping watch even when it wasn't necessary. "I thought I'd feel free." He joined her at the window, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, far enough to maintain respect. "Freedom comes in pieces," he said quietly. "You don't win it all at once. First, you're free from the immediate danger. Then free from the fear of him showing up. Then free from the nightmares, from the flinching, from the voice in your head that sounds like his voice. It takes time." "How much time?" "As much as you need. There's no schedule for healing." She turned to look at him. Really look at him. This man who'd become her protector, her avenger, her unexpected ally. In the city lights filtering through the window, she could see the scars on his knuckles, the permanent tension in his jaw, the weight of violence carried in his eyes. "Who protects you, Nikos? Who gives you the time you need?" The question seemed to surprise him. For a long moment he didn't answer, just stared out at Manhattan, as if it held answers written in the patterns of its lights. Finally, he said, "I don't get protected. I'm the one who protects. That's the role I chose." "That's not a role," Eleni said softly. "That's a prison. Just a different kind than mine." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or pain, or the acknowledgement of a truth he'd been avoiding for years. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, frowning at the screen. "What is it?" Eleni asked. "Message from Chen. Delano made bail." The words hit like a physical blow. Eleni felt her breath stop, her chest tightening with resurgent fear. "How? You said he'd stay in custody. You said—" "Someone with serious money and connections posted it," Nikos interrupted, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Someone who doesn't want him talking. Which means either they're going to try to get him out of the country, or—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. "Or they're going to kill him," Eleni finished, "to keep him quiet about who else is involved." "Yes." Nikos was already moving, gathering his jacket, checking his weapon. "Which means we have maybe 12 hours before he disappears one way or another. I need to find him first." "Why?" The question stopped him. Why does it matter? Whether he runs or dies, either way he's gone. Either way, I'm safe. Nikos turned back to her, his dark eyes intense. "Because he's the key to everyone else. Because if he disappears, the people who protected him, the ones higher up the chain, they walk away clean. And then they do it again with someone else, and another girl ends up standing where you're standing, wondering if she'll ever feel safe." He paused. "And because if he runs, there's always the chance he comes back. I don't leave loose ends, Eleni, not when they threaten people I care about." The last words hung in the air between them, neither quite acknowledging what he'd just admitted. "Then I'm coming with you," she said. "No. You need me. If you're going to find him, you need someone who knows how he thinks, where he'd go, who he'd turn to. I lived with him for 8 months, Nikos. I know his patterns." She stepped closer, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "Besides, you said I'm free. Let me prove it. Let me choose to hunt him instead of hiding from him." Nikos studied her face, seeing the determination there, the steel core that had been there all along beneath the fear. Making a decision he knew he'd probably regret. He nodded. "Get dressed," he said. "We leave in 5 minutes. And Eleni? Stay close to me. Whatever happens out there, whatever we find, you stay close." As she hurried to her room to change, Nikos made a series of calls, to Andreas, to Sophia, to contacts scattered throughout the 5 boroughs. He was assembling his pieces, preparing for the hunt. But in the back of his mind, a truth was crystallizing that he'd been trying to ignore for weeks. He wasn't just protecting Eleni anymore. Somewhere in the late-night conversations, the shared silences, the way she'd stood brave when he needed her to, he'd started caring. Really caring. The kind of caring that made a man reckless, that made him take chances he shouldn't take, that made him forget the cardinal rule of his business. Never get emotionally involved. But it was too late for that warning. He was already involved, already invested in a way that went far beyond professional protection. And as he watched her emerge from the bedroom wearing jeans and a dark jacket, her blonde hair pulled back, her hazel eyes clear and focused, he realized something that should have terrified him, but somehow didn't. He was falling for her. For this survivor who'd become a fighter, this victim who'd become a partner, for the woman brave enough to face her abuser one more time if it meant stopping him forever. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like a countdown, Somewhere out there, Marcus Delano was free and dangerous, and the hunt was about to begin. They found Delano's first safe house by mid-morning, a rent-controlled apartment in Washington Heights, registered under a dead man's name. Sophia had tracked it through utility payments that showed usage patterns inconsistent with the official tenant's supposed death date 3 years earlier. It was the kind of detail only someone with her obsessive attention to digital trails would notice. The thread that, when pulled, unraveled the whole tapestry. But when Nikos and Andreas breached the door, they found the apartment empty. Not just empty, sanitized. No furniture, no personal effects, nothing except the ghost of bleach smell and a burn mark in the middle of the floor where someone had recently destroyed documents. He was here, Andreas confirmed, running a finger along the windowsill and coming up with fresh dust. Left maybe an hour ago, still warm footprints in the carpet. Nikos stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, reading the space the way a priest reads scripture. Eleni watched him work from the doorway, seeing the intelligence behind his reputation, the reason he'd survived decades in a world where most men died young and violent. He's running, Nikos said finally. But he's not running smart. Look at this place. He burned papers instead of taking them. That means he either doesn't have time for proper document disposal, or he's panicked enough to make mistakes. Or both. Sophia's voice crackled through the comms everyone wore. I've got something. Checked his credit cards like you asked. All declined or frozen. No surprise there. But his lawyer made a cash withdrawal this morning. $20,000 from a Chase branch in Midtown. That's running money. And where would he go with $20,000 and a murder charge waiting for him? Andreas mused, moving to check the bathroom. Eleni spoke up from the doorway. Atlantic City. 3 heads turned toward her. He used to talk about it, she continued, stepping into the apartment properly. Said he had friends there from his Navy days, people who didn't ask questions. He'd disappear for weekends sometimes, come back with casino chips in his pockets, and that smile he got when he'd gotten away with something. She paused, remembering. He said once that if things ever went sideways, Atlantic City was where you went to become someone else. Nikos pulled out his phone, dialing. Sophia, check all Atlantic City-bound transportation. Buses, trains, car rentals. Flag anything matching his description. On it. But boss, if he's smart, he ditched his phone and he's paying cash. We might not... Wait. The sound of rapid typing. Got something. Bus depot security camera near Port Authority 20 minutes ago. Man matching Delano's build bought a ticket to Atlantic City under the name Michael Donovan. Paid cash. Bus doesn't leave for another 90 minutes. Which terminal? Nikos was already moving toward the door. South Wing, Gate 17. But Nikos, if you grab him in Port Authority, it's going to be messy. Too many civilians, too many cameras. NYPD will be all over you. We're not grabbing him there, Nikos said, his mind already working through scenarios. We let him get on the bus. Andreas, I need you to get ahead of that route. Take the turnpike, fast. Sophia, which stops does that bus make? Newark, Edison, then straight through to AC. The Edison stop, Nikos decided. Sophia, can you trigger a maintenance issue that forces the bus to make an extended stop there? Can I... Boss, that's a new level even for me. You're asking me to hack into New Jersey transit system and fake a mechanical problem. I'm asking you to do your job. A long pause, then a sigh. Give me 30 minutes. I'll make it happen. As they raced back to Nikos's Mercedes, Eleni felt the adrenaline from earlier returning, sharpening her senses, making every detail vivid. They were really doing this, hunting a man through 3 states, bending rules and breaking laws, all to ensure justice was served. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like reclaiming something she'd lost, some agency over her own story. The drive to Edison took 45 minutes with Nikos behind the wheel, the Mercedes eating up the turnpike with predatory speed. Andreas had already arrived, positioning himself and 2 other men at the rest stop, where Sophia would force the bus to pull in. Father Dmitri, improbably, was there too. His battered Honda Civic parked near the restrooms, the priest himself sitting on a bench reading a Bible, every inch the harmless old man. "The bus will arrive in 8 minutes, Sophia reported. "I've triggered a false engine warning that'll force a stop. The driver will need to run a manual diagnostic, which I've made intentionally confusing. Should buy you 30 minutes before they can continue." "And the cameras?" Nikos asked, pulling into a parking spot with clear sight lines to where the bus would stop, looping footage from yesterday. As far as anyone reviewing it will know, nothing interesting happened today. Eleni watched as Nikos transformed from the man she'd been sharing a safe house with into something else. A predator, yes, but also a general, a strategist, someone who saw 3 moves ahead and never made the first move until he knew how the last one would end. "When the bus stops," he said, checking his weapon one more time before sliding it into the holster concealed under his jacket. "Delano will either stay on board or make a run for it. If he stays, we wait until he disembarks at Atlantic City and take him there, where Sophia has friends in the local PD who owe us favors. If he runs, he'll run," Eleni interrupted. "He always runs when he's scared, and right now, he's terrified." She was right. When the bus pulled into the rest stop 10 minutes later, disgorging passengers for a bathroom break, Delano was the 3rd one off, and the moment his feet hit pavement, his body language changed. He looked around quickly, spotted the freeway beyond the rest stop, and started walking fast toward the fence line. "Moving," Andreas reported over comms, his team flowing from their positions to intercept. But Nikos held up a hand, stopping them. "Let him go a little further, away from the civilians." He glanced at Eleni. "Stay in the car. Lock the doors. If anything goes wrong, nothing's going to go wrong," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Go get him." Nikos and Andreas moved like shadows, closing the distance between themselves and Delano with practiced ease. The former cop was fit, but he was also looking over his shoulder every 3 seconds, which slowed him down. By the time he reached the fence at the edge of the rest stop property, Nikos was 10 feet behind him. "Hello, Marcus." Delano spun, his hand going to his waistband where he'd once carried his service weapon, finding nothing. His face went through the same progression of emotions as in the warehouse: shock, fear, calculation. Then he ran. But he was running toward the fence, away from escape, into a corner. Andreas cut off the angle to the left. One of the other men appeared on the right, and Father Dmitri, moving with surprising speed for a man his age, blocked the path back to the rest stop. "Nowhere to go," Nikos said calmly, approaching at a walk. "It's over." "Over?" Delano laughed, the sound jagged and desperate. "You have no idea what you've done. Do you know who I work for? Who I'm protected by? They'll kill you, Stavros. They'll kill everyone you care about. That girl in your car, what's her name, Eleni? They'll make her wish she'd never been born." Nikos's expression didn't change, but something cold and final settled over him. "You're going to stop talking now. Or what? You'll kill me? Here? In broad daylight?" Delano's confidence was returning now that he'd noticed the lack of weapons drawn. "You can't touch me. I'm still a cop. You hurt me, and you'll have every law enforcement agency in the tri-state area hunting you. Your empire will burn." "My empire has survived worse than you," Nikos replied. "And I'm not going to kill you, Marcus. That would be too easy, too clean." He pulled out his phone, showing the screen to Delano. On it was a video compilation. Clips from the surveillance Sophia had been running, showing Delano collecting bribes, meeting with known traffickers, entering the warehouse where the girls had been held. And other videos, older ones, showing what he'd done to Eleni, to others before her. "This goes to the FBI in exactly 1 hour," Nikos said, "along with financial records, witness testimony, and a complete breakdown of your protection network. Everyone you worked with, Everyone who shielded you. They all go down. Unless what? Delano's voice was hoarse. Unless you get on the phone right now and call your lawyer. Tell him you're ready to cooperate with federal prosecutors. Full disclosure, no immunity deals, no negotiations. You give them everything. Names, dates, operations, the whole structure. You testify against everyone above you in the chain. Nikos paused. And you publicly apologize to every woman you hurt, starting with Eleni. You're insane. No, I'm giving you a choice. Take it, and you'll spend 20 years in prison, maybe 30 if you're unlucky. But you'll be alive. You'll be safe. And maybe, eventually, you'll become a better man than you are right now. Nikos stepped closer, his voice dropping. Or refuse, and I release this evidence in a way that makes you look like a rat anyway. Your bosses will think you're cooperating whether you are or not. And then you won't last 3 days. Not in prison. Not on the street. Not anywhere. Your protection disappears the moment they think you might talk. It was a beautiful trap, Eleni thought from the car, watching through the window. Either way, Delano was finished. But this way, there was at least the possibility of justice rather than just vengeance. Delano's shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him all at once, leaving only a broken man who'd finally run out of road. You win, he said quietly. I'll call the lawyer. As Andreas secured Delano's hands with zip ties, for everyone's safety, and Father Dimitri began making calls to arrange the transfer to federal custody, Nikos returned to the car. He slid into the driver's seat and sat there for a moment, not starting the engine, just breathing. It's really over, Eleni said, and she could hear the wonder in her own voice. He's going to prison. The people he worked with are going to prison, and I get to live. You get to live, Nikos agreed. He turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw exhaustion and relief, and something else, something that made her breath catch. What will you do now? You're free, Eleni, really free. You can go anywhere, be anyone. The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to examine. In the past few weeks, they'd built something in that safe house. A partnership, yes, but also a connection that went deeper than strategy and protection. Late-night conversations about childhood in Greece and Brooklyn, about dreams deferred and losses mourned. The comfortable silences that came from two people who understood survival. The moments when their hands would brush reaching for the same coffee pot. The way his face softened when she woke screaming, and he brought her tea without being asked. I don't know yet, she admitted. I spent so long just trying to survive. I forgot to think about what comes after survival. What I want? Who I want to be? She paused. What about you? What does Nikos Stavros do when he's not saving damsels in distress? He smiled at that, a real smile that reached his eyes. I was never very good at the quiet life, but lately, I've been thinking maybe it's time to try. I'm 38, Eleni. I've built an empire. I've won the wars that mattered. I've kept my family's honor alive in a new country. Maybe there's more to life than being the king of Brooklyn. Like what? Like... He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Like opening that restaurant I've always talked about. Not Olympus. That's for the tourists and the business meetings. Something smaller, more personal. Real Greek food, the kind my Giagya made. A place where people come not because they're afraid of me, but because they want to be there. That sounds perfect, Eleni said softly. What would you call it? I don't know yet. I'll figure it out when I find the right partner to run it with me. His eyes met hers. Someone who understands what it means to start over. Someone brave enough to build something new. The implication was clear, hanging in the air like a question he wasn't quite ready to ask, and she wasn't quite ready to answer. Not yet. not when the dust hadn't even settled from the battle they'd just won. But someday, maybe, when the nightmares faded and the fear receded, and they could both look at each other without seeing victim and savior, but just two people who'd survived their own hells and found each other on the other side. "I should get you back to Manhattan," Nikos said finally, starting the engine. "You've had a long day." "We both have." She settled into the seat, watching New Jersey scroll past. "Nikos, thank you. For everything. For believing me. For protecting me. For giving me a chance to fight back. I'll never forget." "Don't," he interrupted gently. "Don't thank me yet. We still have work to do. Depositions to give, trials to sit through. This isn't over. It's just beginning the next chapter. The boring part, with lawyers and courtrooms, and reliving trauma for juries. Will you be there?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "For the trials?" "Every day," he promised. "I don't abandon people I care about, Eleni. Not when things get difficult. Not ever." The drive back to Manhattan took longer than the drive out, traffic thickening as they approached the city. But Eleni didn't mind. She watched Nikos drive, his hands steady on the wheel, his profile sharp against the setting sun, and thought about second chances. About how sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected places. About how the man the whole city feared had turned out to be the one who made her feel safe. 3 months later, Marcus Delano stood in federal court and pleaded guilty to 43 counts, including trafficking, bribery, assault, and corruption. His testimony brought down 7 other police officers, 2 city officials, and exposed connections to trafficking networks operating in 12 states. The judge sentenced him to 40 years without possibility of parole. Eleni attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery with Nikos beside her. And every day, when Delano's eyes found hers, she met them steadily, without fear, without flinching. The girl who'd whispered, "If I speak, he'll hurt me again," was gone. In her place was a woman who'd spoken, who'd survived, who'd won. Spring came to New York with the apologetic enthusiasm of a guest who knows they're late to the party. By April, the brutal winter that had defined the early months of the year had finally loosened its grip, giving way to warming temperatures and the kind of soft rain that washed the city clean. In Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, on a corner where Smith Street met Warren, a new cafe was preparing to open. The sign above the door read, Ilios, in elegant gold letters, the Greek word for sun. Through the wide windows, passers-by could see exposed brick walls painted a warm terracotta, wooden tables and chairs that looked vintage but were carefully chosen for comfort, and hanging plants that created a small garden atmosphere. The menu board behind the counter promised traditional Greek coffee, homemade pastries, and lunch options that read like a love letter to Mediterranean home cooking. Eleni stood in the center of her cafe, a paint-smudged bandana holding back her blonde hair, surveying her kingdom. 6 months ago, she'd been a girl who couldn't break a wine glass without having a panic attack. Now she was a business owner, her name on a lease, her vision taking physical form in wood and brick, and the scent of fresh bread from the ovens being installed in the back. The transformation hadn't been easy or linear. There had been setbacks. Nights when the nightmares returned and she woke up screaming, days when a stranger's voice or footsteps would send her spiraling into panic attacks that left her shaking for hours. The trial had been its own special hell, having to recount every detail of the abuse, while Delano's lawyers tried to paint her as a willing participant, a vindictive ex-lover, anything but what she was, a survivor. But she'd had help. Therapy twice a week with a trauma specialist who didn't flinch at the worst of her stories. Support groups with other survivors who understood in ways no one else could. And Nikos, who'd kept his promise to be there through all of it, sitting in courtrooms and hospital waiting rooms, and her tiny new apartment at 3 a.m. when the panic attacks hit, never judging, never pushing, just present in the way that said, "I'm not going anywhere." Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully, both of them aware of the power imbalance that had defined their initial meeting, both determined not to let gratitude or trauma bonding masquerade as something real. For months, they'd existed in a careful limbo. Friends, certainly partners in the legal battle that had consumed the winter, but nothing more. Nothing physical. Barely even touching except when the nightmares made comfort necessary. But gradually, as Eleni healed and found her footing, as the fear receded and her natural personality emerged from beneath the layers of trauma, something had shifted. Inside jokes developed. Comfortable silences lengthened. Their coffee meetings became daily rituals neither would miss. And one evening in March, when Nikos had been helping her paint the cafe's walls, and she'd accidentally gotten primer in his hair, they'd both reached to clean it off at the same moment, and their hands had collided, and their eyes had met, and they'd kissed. Soft and tentative, and tasting of paint fumes and possibility. And when they'd pulled apart, Eleni had been smiling, really smiling, and Nikos had looked like a man who'd just been given a gift he hadn't thought he deserved. "We should take this slow," she'd said. "As slow as you need," he'd agreed. And they had. No rushing, no pressure. Just the careful building of something real between two people who'd both learned that the quick and passionate often burned out, but the slow and steady could last forever. Now, on the eve of Ilios's opening, Eleni heard the cafe's door open and turned to see Nikos entering with 2 cups from the coffee shop down the street. Their ritual for the past month, since Ilios's machines weren't operational yet. He'd dressed down today, jeans and a black sweater instead of his usual suits, though he still wore the Patek Philippe and the gold ring that marked him as who he was. The tattoos on his neck were fully visible, no longer hidden beneath dress shirt collars. In the month since Delano's arrest, Nikos had been quietly stepping back from the more violent aspects of his business, delegating to Andreas and others, focusing instead on the legitimate enterprises that had always existed alongside the shadow operations. It turned out the King of Brooklyn was just as good at running restaurants and real estate developments as he'd been at running the streets. "Coffee delivery," he announced, handing her a cup. "Your usual, way too much sugar and a shot of vanilla that would make any Greek grandmother weep." "Yaya would understand," Eleni replied, using the affectionate Greek term for grandmother. "She'd want me happy, and this makes me happy." She took a sip and gestured around the cafe. "What do you think? Are we ready?" Nikos made a show of inspecting everything: the arranged tables, the menu board, the small shelf of Greek products for sale near the register. "I think," he said slowly, "that you've created something special here. Something real. I'm proud of you, Eleni." The word settled over her like a blessing. "I couldn't have done it without you. The loan, the contractors, No," he interrupted gently. "You could have done all of this without me. Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe the path would have been different. But you would have gotten here. The strength was always yours, Eleni. I just helped you remember it." She set down her coffee and moved to stand in front of him, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. At 26, she'd finally grown into herself, no longer the frightened girl in too large clothes, but a woman who knew her own worth, who'd faced down her demons and won. "You saved my life," she said simply. "That night in Olympus when I broke that glass, if you hadn't noticed, if you hadn't cared, I'd probably be dead by now. Delano would have killed me eventually. He was getting worse, more violent. It was only a matter of time." Nikos's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb gently stroking her cheekbone where the bruises had once been. "And you saved mine," he said quietly. "I was drowning in violence, in the business, in being the person everyone feared. I'd forgotten there was another way to be strong. You reminded me. You showed me that the real power isn't in making people afraid. It's in making them feel safe. They stood like that for a long moment, the cafe quiet around them, spring rain pattering against the windows. Outside, Brooklyn moved at its usual frenetic pace, but in here, in this space Eleni had created, there was peace. "I love you," Eleni said, the words coming easier than she'd expected. "I know we said we'd take things slow, and I know there's probably a dozen reasons why this is complicated, but I love you, Nikos Stavros. Not because you saved me, not because I'm grateful, but because of who you are. Because you're kind underneath the reputation. Because you kept every promise you made. Because when I look at you, I see home." Nikos's eyes were suspiciously bright. For a man who'd made grown men weep with a look, he seemed to be having trouble with his own emotions. "I love you too," he managed. "I have for months. I was just waiting until you were ready to hear it without wondering if it was real or just some trauma response." He smiled. "You're sure?" "Because I come with a lot of baggage, Eleni. A past that's not pretty. A reputation that scares people. A life that's complicated in ways most people can't even imagine." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "Your past made you who you are, and who you are is someone I love. As for complicated, I think we're both pretty well versed in complicated at this point." He kissed her then, properly this time, not the tentative exploration from a month ago, but something deeper, more certain. A kiss that tasted like coffee, and promises, and the future they were building together, one careful day at a time. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Eleni laughed. "So, about that restaurant you mentioned, the one you wanted to open with the right partner. What about it?" "Well, I know someone who's opening a cafe and might be interested in expanding. Maybe a dinner service? Traditional Greek cuisine, the kind your gyagya made? We could call it." She pretended to think. "I don't know. Maybe Stavros and Costa?" Nikos grinned, the expression transforming his usually serious face into something younger, lighter. "Partnership has a nice ring to it. Though I have to warn you, my gyagya's recipes are legendary. We'd have a line around the block." "Good," Eleni said. "Let them line up. We'll feed them good food and strong coffee, and remind them that Brooklyn's not just about the hustle. It's about community, family, taking care of your own." Over the next few months, that vision became reality. Ilios opened to immediate success, with lines forming before dawn for Eleni's fresh-baked koulouri and strong Greek coffee. The evening service that Nikos helped develop drew a different crowd, neighborhood regulars mixed with adventurous foodies willing to brave Cobble Hill for authentic moussaka and slow-roasted lamb. But what made Ilios special wasn't just the food. It was the atmosphere, the feeling that you'd walked into someone's home rather than a commercial establishment. It was the way Eleni remembered regular customers' names and orders, the way Nikos could be found most mornings at the corner table by the window, laptop open, running his legitimate business empire while keeping a protective eye on the cafe and the woman who owned it. It became known as a safe place, for Greek immigrants seeking a taste of home, for young women who needed a quiet space away from the world's harshness, for anyone who needed proof that second chances existed and happy endings weren't just for fairy tales. One morning in late summer, Eleni looked up from the espresso machine to see a familiar face. Detective Chen stood at the counter, no longer in her usual professional attire, but casual clothes, off-duty. "Detective?" Eleni greeted her with a smile. "The usual?" "Just Chen is fine when I'm not working," the detective replied. "And yes, please, your coffee is the only thing that gets me through morning shifts." As Eleni prepared the drink, Chen said quietly, "I wanted you to know. Delano's appeal was denied yesterday. His sentence stands. 40 years, no parole. He'll die in prison." Eleni's hands didn't shake as she finished the coffee. A year ago, even the mention of his name would have sent her into panic. Now, it was just information. just the final chapter of a story she'd already moved past. "Thank you for telling me," she said, sliding the cup across the counter. "On the house, by the way. I can't accept—" "You can and you will," Eleni insisted. "You helped save 15 girls that night. You helped put away not just Delano, but an entire corruption network. The least I can do is give you free coffee for life." Chen smiled, accepting the drink. "How are you doing? Really?" "I'm good," Eleni said, and realized she meant it. "Some days are harder than others, but mostly, I'm good. I have the cafe. I have people who care about me. I have a future I'm excited about. That's more than I ever thought I'd have." "And Stavros?" Chen asked, glancing to where Nikos sat in his usual spot, currently in what looked like a heated phone conversation in Greek. "That's working out?" "It is," Eleni confirmed. "I know from the outside it probably looks strange, the mafioso and the girl he saved, but it's not like that. We're partners, equals. He doesn't see me as someone who needs protecting anymore, and I don't see him as my savior. We're just two people who found each other at the right time." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "For what it's worth, I've seen a change in him too. Word on the street is that Stavros has gone soft, that he's not the man he used to be. They mean it as criticism, but I think it's the highest compliment you could pay someone. That they grew, that they changed, that they became more than what violence made them." After Chen left, Eleni brought a fresh coffee to Nikos's table and slid into the chair across from him. "Chen says Delano's appeal was denied." "I know," Nikos said. "Andreas told me this morning. How do you feel?" "Relieved, closed, like I can really move forward now without looking over my shoulder." She reached across the table, lacing her fingers through his. The gesture was comfortable now, natural, no longer tentative. "I was thinking. Dangerous hobby," he teased, "about expanding. Not just dinner service here, but maybe another location. Something in Queens, near where I grew up. A place for the community, like Ilios, but maybe with a focus on job training. Hiring people who need second chances." Nikos's eyes lit up. "I love it. And I know the perfect location. A building on Ditmars Boulevard that just became available. It's actually next to your parents' bakery." "Really?" Eleni's face broke into a huge smile. "That would be perfect. We could call it Helios," they said simultaneously, then laughed. "The sun god to Ilios's son," Nikos explained. "Bigger, bolder, but still connected. A family of restaurants." "A family," Eleni repeated, liking the sound of it. "Speaking of which, and don't panic when I say this, but have you ever thought about actual family? The kind with kids and school plays and—" "I have," Nikos interrupted gently. "But only if you want that. I'm 41 now, Eleni. I've lived a life that most people would call full, even if it was violent. If children are in our future, I'd be honored. If not, I'm happy with exactly what we have." "I want it," she admitted. "Not right now. I want to get the second cafe established, and I want us to have more time just being us. But someday, a daughter maybe, or a son, someone we can teach to be strong but gentle. Someone who grows up knowing that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up when things get hard." "Like I showed up for you," Nikos said softly. "Like we showed up for each other," Eleni corrected. That evening, after the cafe closed and they were walking back to the apartment they now shared, a renovated brownstone in Park Slope that Nikos had bought and Eleni had decorated, they passed a street musician playing Greek music on a bouzouki. Nikos stopped, pulled Eleni into his arms, and began to dance with her right there on the sidewalk, ignoring the amused looks from passers-by. "What are you doing?" Eleni laughed, letting him lead her in the steps of a traditional Kalamatianos. "Living," he said simply. Dancing with the woman I love on a beautiful Brooklyn evening. Isn't that what people do when they're happy? Is that what you are? Happy. He stopped dancing, but kept his arms around her, looking down at her face that had become as familiar to him as his own reflection. Happier than I ever thought possible, he admitted. A year ago, I was the king of Brooklyn, feared and respected and absolutely alone. Now you're mine, Eleni finished, rising on her toes to kiss him. And I'm yours. And we're building something bigger than either of us could have built alone. To second chances, Nikos toasted with an invisible glass. To choosing to be brave, Eleni countered. To finding home in unexpected places, they said together. The musician finished his song and started another, and they danced again as the sun set over Brooklyn, casting long shadows and golden light. And if anyone watching wondered at the sight of the Greek mafioso dancing with the cafe owner, both of them smiling like teenagers despite the scars and tattoos and weathered hands that told of harder times, well, that was Brooklyn for you. A place where anyone could start over, where broken things got mended, where the king of the underworld could fall in love with the survivor, and both could find their way to something like peace. 6 months later, Helios opened in Astoria to crowds that stretched around the block. Eleni's parents were there, her father crying openly as he watched his daughter cut the ribbon on her second business. Nikos's people were there too, Andreas and Sophia, and even Father Dmitri, blessing the building in both Greek and English. And in the corner, at a table set for two, was a photograph. Elena, Nikos's sister, who'd sent it from her monastery in Crete. It showed her smiling, a small, tentative smile, but real, standing in a garden she'd planted herself. The note that came with it read simply, "Proud of you, brother. Keep choosing light over darkness. Keep choosing love." Eleni found Nikos looking at the photo during the opening party, his expression soft and sad and hopeful all at once. She slipped her hand into his and said, "Maybe we should visit her. When things quiet down here, show her what you've built, who you've become." "I'd like that," Nikos said. "I'd like her to meet you. To see proof that the darkness doesn't win, not if you fight hard enough." "We fought hard enough," Eleni corrected. "We fought and we won, and now we get to live. Really live, not just survive." That night, as they stood on the balcony of their brownstone, looking out over the Brooklyn skyline, with its million lights blazing eternal, Eleni thought about the journey that had brought them here. From terror to trust, from victim to survivor to victor, from a broken wine glass and a whispered confession to 2 successful businesses and a love that had been built slowly, carefully, on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine care. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" Nikos asked, pulling her closer against the autumn chill. "For hearing me, that night in Olympus, when I whispered, 'If I speak, he'll hurt me again.' You heard me. Not just the words, but what I was asking for. Permission to be brave. Protection while I found my strength. And you gave me that without asking for anything in return." "You're wrong about that," Nikos said. "I asked for something. I asked you to trust me. And you did, even when you had every reason not to. That trust saved me as much as my protection saved you." They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 survivors who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something in the light. The city spread out before them, indifferent to their small story, unaware that in one of its millions of buildings, in one corner of Brooklyn's vast tapestry, 2 people had proven that redemption was real, that love could grow in unlikely soil, that sometimes the monsters became protectors, and the victims became warriors, and everyone found their way home. And in the morning, they'd wake up and go to Ilios, where Nikos would take his usual seat by the window, and Eleni would bring him coffee made just the way he liked it, and they'd plan their next expansion, their next adventure, their next chapter. Because that's what survivors did. They kept moving forward, kept building, kept choosing to live rather than merely exist. The Greek mafia boss and the girl he'd saved had become simply Nikos and Eleni, partners in business and life. Proof that the strongest empires aren't built on fear, but on the quiet courage of two people deciding to trust each other with their broken pieces and building something whole. And in Brooklyn, where second chances grow like wildflowers through sidewalk cracks, that was the most natural thing in the world.